Hello everyone. We are on module 9, but I am going to be talking about the topic on module 8 here to complete the third part of the varieties of English we discussed in our earlier module. So, in this video, we will explore the Caribbean English, Canadian English, and Pidgins and Creoles that emerged with the process of colonization of the Caribbean islands. Now, when we talk about Caribbean English, we are talking about the Caribbean islands, and English is spoken in those islands. The countries of the Caribbean face multilingual situations that resemble those of the Pacific. Paradoxically, however, the solutions to social problems involving languages in contact appear to become more difficult as the varieties of the languages are more similar. The very question of whether Jamaican Creole is a separate language or a point on a continuation that concludes Jamaican English is a charged political question with implications for education policy, the legal system, and the mass media. The problem of definition involves whether a Creole language is stable or evolving, and if evolving, in what direction. So, a determination of these questions requires a consideration of the complex history of the region, which for the English language goes back to the arrival of settlers in Jamestown, Virginia in 1607 and in Bermuda in 1609. A full history would take into account the Spanish presence in the Caribbean during the 16th century, heritage that is clearly seen in Puerto Rico, where both Spanish and English survive side by side, as well as in Belize, Panama, and Guyana. For most of the Anglophone Caribbean islands, however, including Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and Tobago, the Leeward Islands, and the Windward Islands, the most relevant languages in contact are those of the west coast of Africa. Ewe, Twi, Efik, Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa, and other African languages were spoken by slaves who were brought to the islands during the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. In addition to the syllable times rhythm that we have seen in other varieties of World English, final syllables in Jamaican Creole frequently have a rising tone, reflecting the West African tone languages spoken by the slaves who carried their own phonology into the reinterpretation of a Germanic language with light and heavy stresses. Despite gaps in the written records of both the early forms of Caribbean English and the African source languages, continuing lexicographical efforts have revealed much about the complex history of English in this part of the world. A large number of words can be traced clearly to African languages. Forms of nem, which means to eat, occur as verbs in Wolof and Fula, and as nouns referring to food in Hausa, which is nama, flesh, meat, or efik, unam, flesh, tui, inam, flesh or meat of any animal, so forth. In Jamaican Creole, nyam is generally the verb, ni nyam, a noun, which means food, and ni nyam's a special word, yam. One of the most characteristic Jamaicanisms, yuk, to prick, poke, spur, jab, stab, etc., has been traced to several possible sources. The most plausible one is perhaps F.G. Cassidy's suggestion of fula, which is juka, to spur, poke, or knock down. Obiha, the practice of malignant magic, has roots in Efik ubio, a charm, and tui, witch, wizard. Part of the vitality of Caribbean English is in the formation of compounds that are loan translations of African metaphors. Doormouth, which means a doorway, or the place thus outside the doorway of a small house or hut, can be compared with Yoruba, Iloro, Inu, which means threshold, literally portsmouth, and Hausa, Baki, a mouth, an opening, an entrance, and a strong I, firm, determined, is possibly a loan translation from the tree Nami Nani Ye Den, strong I, insolent, self-willed. It is often difficult to be certain about etymologies in Caribbean Creoles. Cassidy points out that Kakanabu, which is foolishness or nonsense, at first appears African with the initial reduplication and the final vowel oo, but it turns out to be quite regularly derived from cock and bull, as in a cock and bull story. Conversely, doti, which is earth, soil, or excrement, at first appears to be a regular Jamaican development of Standard English dirt, dirty. However, the main source turns out to be twi, which means in Twi language, soil, earth, with some influence from the English words. More recent developments are recorded fully in print and especially as regards music in the electronic media. The speech of the Rastafari, a religious and social movement that arose during the 1940s among the Jamaican poor and was energized by a sense of identification with Africa and especially Ethiopia, has given new forms to pronouns. You is eliminated for being divisive, and I and I is used instead, as well as for I and for me. From popular culture, Jamaican English and the world at large have received the words reggae and ska. The variety of Creoles in the Caribbean can be illustrated by versions of sentences in as many as 33 different languages. Canadian English. Now, Canadian English has much in common with that of the United States, while retaining a few features of British pronunciation and spelling. Where alternative forms exist, the likelihood for a particular choice to be British or American varies with reason, education, and age. British items such as chips, serviette, and cups tend to occur more frequently in the West, while the more common American choices, French fries, napkin, and grove, tend to occur in the East. British spellings such as collar, Colour, and pronunciations such as schedule with an initial S occur most frequently throughout Canada among more highly educated and older speakers. In addition, there are a number of words with meanings that are neither British nor American, but particularly Canadian. Thus, one finds Words such as aboitau, which means dam, blue nose, Miss Nova Scotian, Digby chicken, which is smoke cured herring, mukluk, which means Inuit boot, reeve, which is the chairman of a municipal council, saltchuk, which means ocean, etc. The Dictionary of Canadianisms, published in Canada's centennial year, allows historical linguists to establish in detail the sources of Canadian English. Many of the earlier settlers in Canada came from the United States, and the influence of the United States has always been very strong. A writer in the Canadian Journal in 1857 complained of the new words imported by travelers, daily circulated by American newspapers, and eagerly incorporated into the language of our provincial press. Needless to say, he considered the influence wholly bad, and his words are still echoed by Canadians who deplore the wide circulation of American books and magazines in Canada, and in recent years, the further influence of movies and television. Nevertheless, a linguistically informed opinion would have to concede that in a language, as in other activities, it is difficult to differentiate what belongs to Canada from what belongs to the United States, let alone either from what might be called general North American. Now we'll talk about Pidgins and Creoles. First of all, let's understand what Pidgins and Creoles are and what their differences are. These are certain categories of languages. Pidgins are non native lingua franca, a way of communicating across two or more languages, whereas Creoles have native speakers of their own. Actually, when Pidgin languages get passed down to generations and become nativized by the next generations, they become Creoles. A Creole is like a Pidgin, and it's based on two or more languages, but unlike a Pidgin, it is learned as a native language and it contains full grammar and syntax. Of the varieties of English discussed thus far, those of West and East Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific Rim coexist and interact with well established English based Pidgins and Creoles. The linguistic and sociological issues that are raised by the varieties of language in daily contact have already been suggested with respect to Jamaican English. The theoretical interest to linguists, however, goes even deeper because the study of Pidgin and Creole languages may give clues to a better understanding of a number of interrelated problems. Because English based Creoles are so numerous and so widespread, the study of present day English in all its worldwide varieties is useful not only in itself but also in the illumination that it gives to some of these most basic issues in language and cognition. Of the approximately 125 Pidgin and Creole languages throughout the world, spoken by more than 9 million people, about 35 are English based. Historical settlement and colonization produced two major groups of English based Creoles, an Atlantic group and a Pacific group. The Atlantic Creoles were established in West Africa and the Caribbean area mainly during the 17th and 18th centuries and include varieties in Sierra Leone, Creole, Liberia, Suriname, Barbados, Trinidad, and Tobago, Guyana, Jamaica, and other West African countries and Caribbean islands. The Pacific Group, established largely during the 19th century, includes varieties in Hawaii, Papua New Guinea, and other islands. The lexical impoverishment of Pidgin and Creole language often results in paraphrastic and metaphorical expressions to designate things and events which in established language are signified by unrelated morphemes. Let's try some Pidgin here. The single word hum in English is expressed in talk Pidgin, literally talk Pidgin, by this circumlocution sing long time mouse e pass. That is, to sing when the mouth is closed. English grass in talk Pidgin is grass. Mustache is mouse grass. Beard is grass belong face, which means grass on face. Hair is grass belong head. Eyebrow is grass on top long eye, which is grass on top a long eye. Weed is grass nogut. So, in these Pidgin expressions, prepositions and word order rather than inflectional endings signal the grammatical and syntactic relationships. The preposition belong from the word belong serves a number of functions in talk Pidgin, that is, in English, would be assigned to varying case forms, including possession. My mother is Mama belonging me. Mama belong me. John's house is house belong John. When a greatly reduced system of inflections and a correspondingly greater reliance on function words and word order, Pidgin and Creole languages show clearly the analytic structure that we noted when we observed the redevelopment from Old English to Middle English. The other side of lexical impoverishments is the visibility and richness of certain aspectual distinctions, some never explicitly marked in the verb phrase of historical English. For example, habitual or continuing action is indicated in Hawaiian Creole by including the particular stay in the verb phrase, and other Creoles have similar markers. Let's look at this sentence in Hawaiian Creole. I stay running Kapiolani Park every evening. In this sentence, the verb pattern indicates habitual or repetitive action rather than action completed at a certain point. Similarly, the accomplishment of purpose is made explicit in Creole languages around the world. The English sentence, John went to Honolulu to see Mary, does not specify whether John actually saw Mary or not. Such ambiguity must be resolved in Hawaiian Creole. If the speaker knows that John saw Mary, the appropriate sentence is John bin go Honolulu go see Mary. If John did not see Mary, or if the speaker does not know whether John saw Mary, the appropriate verb form expresses intention without expressing completion. John bin go Honolulu for see Mary. Another important factor of language in general, which the study of Pidgins and Creoles clarifies, is the idea of a linguistic continuum. The regularity of such skills in Pidgin and Creole languages worldwide leads to yet another interesting problem: the order of acquisition of the skilled features in the process of learning a language. Typically, the standard features near the basilectal end of the implicational skill are learned first, and those near the equilectal end are learned later, if at all. So, the study of language acquisition leads finally to a convergence in the concerns of Creolists and generative grammarians. Thanks for listening and watching the video. The materials have been borrowed from your textbook, A History of the English Language. Please read the textbook and let me know if you have any questions. You all have a nice day.